Welcome to Recovery His Way. This is Tom Reynolds, your host, and today I'm blessed to have a very dear friend of mine, Brock Miller, with us. Brock, good to have you.
It's good to be here, Tom.
I've known Brock for about 5 years. I was looking about 5 years ago we met, and you're one of my very dearest Ohio State fans.
OH.
And Cleveland friends. So
Yes.
It's been good to have you as a part of our family for this 5 years. I know you came here and graduated about a year after you originally came, back in May of 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've been out for about 4 years from here.
Yes.
So I appreciate you coming back and sharing your story and hopefully giving us insight into what we can learn from what this Christ-centered recovery really looks like. And I mean, I know your story is a great one. I thought maybe we'd start with just sharing a little bit about the background, just kind of give us kind of a feel of what your recovery story is about.
Well, I'll start with, I guess when I was younger, I grew up in the Church of Christ. Mom took me to the church. I was baptized when I was 16 years old. And then fast forward, I was very lukewarm. Lived on the fence. And for you people, that hurts, by the way. To live on the fence and try to be in Christ and then still do what I was doing. And when I was in here in 2017, I was counseling with Jeremy Mitchell, who then was the curriculum coordinator, I believe was his title then. And I talked in depth about I didn't think that I got baptized for the right reasons. So he's didn't hesitate. We went down to the inner city Church of Christ, and he baptized me.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I knew that I was baptized.
Mm-hmm. When was that again?
It was in 2017.
Okay.
Yeah. It was in April 11th, I believe, was the actual date.
Okay.
And that kind of began my spiritual journey, my recovery. Of course, in true Brock fashion, I did graduate the 6-month program, but didn't remain sober. I was drinking off and on. I was very lonely after graduating. I was living in a house. I was renting from Jeremy's father, and I was by myself. And at that time, there wasn't any openings for like the halfway house, and which I needed, by the way. I very much needed that accountability, and I didn't have it. And then, luckily, I met my wife in July. So from May to the end of May till July, and when I met her, things still in true Brock fashion. I still kind of tried to dabble. She could actually tell you the number of days. She was very vigilant on Brock messed up on this day, and she has a total tally of the of the number. And I kind of went for about another year. And that was when I became sober. So I kind of really feel that was really my spiritual recovery. It began when I was baptized, and but I was still sitting on the fence doing that kind of stuff. And since then, it has been involvement in church, going to church on a regular basis, and really communication with my wife.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting that you said, having gone through this program, obviously, for 6 months, you're in a pretty intensive social environment. There's a lot of structure, there's a lot of socializing, there's a lot of being with people. And you go from that to the stark difference of, okay, I go rent a house, I got a job, but I'm just kind of in this house I come back to by myself and all those kind of things. And you're talking about how it didn't take long before you started relapsing because of that loneliness and started, kind of going that direction. And then it's interesting that, kind of establishing a relationship with who became your wife really was the next relationship in that social situation that kind of helped galvanize your recovery in some ways. I'm just interested in kind of maybe you could. So it just strikes me how much being in relationship, and I guess the accountability that comes with that relationship is important. Maybe you could comment more to how that does help in your recovery, at least, maybe in others too.
For me, it was very important. It was my relationship with my wife helped me probably tenfold. It was being able to be in a loving relationship that was not toxic, that wasn't dysfunctional, that she showed me love with no strings attached. And I never had that before. Even though I had been married for many years before, I didn't have that kind of marriage because it was dysfunctional. It was functionally dysfunctional at best. But relationships, and it's not just a relationship with my wife, it's a relationship that I have with you. It's the relationship that I've had with other sober people. Most of the people that I'm close with are recovering addicts. And being that they are addicts, we have that likeness. And if there's a struggle, of course, I've had to distance myself from some of these people too, because they still aren't there. They're not at that point. And that's kind of, but it is very, for me, it was very important. The loneliness, wasn't even expecting that. I was not expecting that to be a huge deal. I know that, the acronym hungry, angry, lonely, tired, but I never felt lonely in the house. And it is in a bubble, and you are structured, and we're taking the tests and things like that. But the accountability from a partner or a friend or somebody that can just keep you accountable is, to me, it was crucial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned the acronym, HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired are all kind of key triggers to set up relapse, right? Because any one of those or combination thereof can kind of start setting us up to go back to old habits.
Yes.
I know you came here in 2016 to His Way, but your recovery journey was longer than that. So maybe give us a quick thumbnail just about how did you get into using in the first place? Where did that take you? You mentioned that you'd been married previously. Mm-hmm. I know you have some kids and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can kind of fill some of those gaps in for us in terms of, and what brought you to Alabama? You obviously came from Ohio to the great state of Alabama for a reason, and so maybe you can kind of share that story.
I started drinking at the age of 13. I remember that vividly. I also remember how much I liked it, even though I threw up that night. It was on New Year's Eve, and I was 13 years old, and me and my cousin was like, hey, we'll mix these. He called them hurricanes. He didn't know what he was doing. He's just mixing all kinds of stuff up, and I got drunk, and I liked it. I didn't throw up that night, and in my head, I think that I was an alcoholic at that point. I just didn't know it yet.
Well, that's interesting. You obviously grew up in church. It's not like this is like you're running the streets or that kind of thing. This is a relative that you're getting drunk with. Was
Yes.
your cousin older than you, your age, or?
He was about 2 years older than me.
Right. So that kind of 15-year-old with the 13-year-old,
Yeah.
that kind of thing happens. It's not an unusual story, I think, for a lot of guys to have that first exposure that way. I'm interested, you made the comment that the first time you drank, you felt like you were an alcoholic. In the sense that, why do you say that? You threw up. You would think, oh, that was a terrible experience. I never want to do that again.
I guess in a non-alcoholic person or a person that would drink, maybe even socially, they may have vomited before and have gone through that experience, and they don't want to do it again. I was looking for that. That was the experience that I was looking for. it was a way to numb myself out of very low self-esteem.
Okay.
That was doing self-inflection and looking. At the end of the day, it was low self-esteem.
I mean, that's not unusual for a 13-year-old, right?
Right.
I think probably every 13-year-old would probably have to say that they've struggled with that. Was there something in particular that drove your low self-esteem? I mean, any particular issues or things that came from as you look back on it, kind of the source of those? So what I'm thinking about as parents might listen to this today and kind of think about, I'm raising kids. They're about 13. What do I need to be aware of?
Two things. One, I was the fat kid. I've always been the fat kid. Now I'm a fat adult, but I'm okay with being that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Would I like to change some of my eating habits and things? Some I have. I did get up to about 300 pounds, and now I'm down to about 280. I tend to do this thing, where I up and down. Kind of done that my whole life, but initially I was always the big guy.
Okay.
In school, and I got made fun of, and I found that if I make fun of myself, excuse me, first, it takes control out of it. It gives me the control.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so I just, if I call myself the fat guy, that's it.
Right.
There's no more jokes. There's no more fat jokes.
Right.
But I'm still the fat guy, and I knew that I was the
Right.
fat guy, and
Right.
it still hurt.
Right. Great point.
So that and talking to girls, that 13-year-old boys or 14-year-old boys are one big hormone, and that's kind of going through too. And I found it very awkward to just have a conversation with girls.
Mm-hmm.
And alcohol, you have very low inhibitions, and you'll pretty much say whatever is there, kind of thing. And,
Right.
That gave me that kind of in.
Right. Okay. So take us. So that started when you were 13, 14 years old. How did the drinking progress? And
It would be not a lot. 13, 14, 15. I know that several times I stole bottles of liquor from my mother's father, from my grandfather's house. They didn't go to church, and I would get a bottle, take it, and me and my friends would get drunk, and things like that. It really started ramping up as I was driving. I was maybe drinking 4, 5, 6 beers, driving home, going to friends' house, going to parties, things like that. And like I said, I found very much at that time it was much more easier to talk to
Right.
girls.
Right. So so at some point, obviously, you talked enough to a girl that you got married.
Yeah, I did.
How did the progression of alcohol abuse kind of develop during that time as you became an adult? Obviously, got married, had kids, and that kind of stuff.
Well, I met her at college, and our first date was at a bar. So that was, going and drinking, her and I together. Although she could turn that off, I couldn't. We started dating in 97, and by 99, we were having our first daughter. We were married, and then in 2000 we had our second daughter, and in between that time we got married before our second daughter was born. So it was dysfunctional from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what transpired that kind of get you to the point that you finally started seeking recovery? I mean, what happened? What kind of drove that? And obviously, you were kind of operationally alcoholic in the sense that you still, had a family. You were still, I assume, working at some level and those kind of things. And yet, your drinking was creating destruction along the way.
Yes, it created a lot of destruction. In '99, I got hired at Superior Dairy in Canton, Ohio. I worked there for about 5 years until I got fired because I'd already had one warning because I smelled like booze. And then the second time I ended up getting fired. So it was 20, I don't know, 24, 25 at that time. And so that creates a lot of strain. I was pretty much the guy that was the breadwinner at the time. I had insurance, and I put her through college. She was working part-time as an accountant. So that caused a lot of fights, a lot of pressure. And then I went to nursing school. I got my LPN certificate, became a nurse, and in true Brock fashion, I found that I liked opiates, and I got in trouble for taking some morphine, and I was no longer an LPN at that time. They put me on probation on my nursing license in Ohio, and I had to work for a company for 6 months and without passing narcotics. And as a nurse, that's impossible to. They don't want to hire the nurse that takes narcotics. It just is not a, it's not something they're going to do.
Right.
So I had to, that was really my passion, if you will. Like if I was looking at what, you tell kids, what are you good at? I was good at being a nurse. Compassionate, I'm empathetic. I know sometimes I come across as being very brash too, but I'm very good at helping people. So.
Okay. So, I mentioned that you moved, obviously at some point came from Ohio to Alabama. So what prompted that? What had happened that kind of said, okay, I need to move to Alabama?
In 2015, my ex-wife was at wit's end, and I knew that I needed help. I had been through, at that time, 7 rehabs.
Okay.
Some of these were from jobs. They were, hey, you need to get help. I went through a 30-day program when I worked at PBG. Can't think of the name of the place, but anyhow, I went through a 30-day program there, and in 2015, it was in February, I went to Project Rescue in Priceville, Alabama. That was the first real, I don't want to say it was the first real time. It was where I thought I was serious.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've gone to these other programs, these 30-day programs, I guess, that worked. Mm-hmm. You hit some kind of roadblock at work. They said, hey, you need to do something. So you did that. Were those programs helpful? Was there a benefit to that kind of a program? And obviously you came to the point of coming to a more residential, longer-term program at some point. But, what were the benefits that you were finding in attending those 30-day programs?
They got work off my back.
Okay.
That was the benefit. Okay. It was to keep my job at that point.
So you weren't really looking to change anything? You weren't looking even to quit drinking? You were?
Not really. Not at first, no. I would say it wasn't. I would venture to say I was in my late 30s when I was really starting to think about, I knew that I was an alcoholic. I knew that I had issues, but I didn't want to quit. And now I've lost my nursing license. I've lost the and then I had a decent job. At PPG, and they're like, okay, well, you need to go to this rehab. I did the 30-day rehab, and everything was fine, but you can only do this for a period of time. Mm-hmm. And I got caught again, and I got let go. And when I came down here, the benefits that I seen was it was spiritual. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I needed to be in a rehab that was a spiritual-based rehab.
Why was that important to you? I mean,
it was particularly important because I knew that I could go to the Church of Christ.
okay.
That was what I knew that I needed to be at.
Okay.
I've sat in the pews, and although maybe sometimes not even coherent, I'm not really proud to say, but I have done that, and but I've gotten enough of the word soberly, of sitting there, that I knew that that was the place I needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really know at that time my journey was starting to really understand, like, where his way is different from other rehabs, that it's a spiritual rehabilitation. And we say that, hey, I went to his way, it's a drug and alcohol rehabilitation, but I was looking, it was a spiritual rehabilitation, which was very foreign to me. Because you're like, I'm going to a drug rehab, but the more you get in here and figure that out, that's what I realized. The other programs focused on mind and body, but they forgot that there's a soul, and so they didn't have those three components with them. That third component, being the soul, which is the most important, was missing. Right. I can tell you the mechanics of how things work, mm-hmm. From those secular programs, but they were never focusing on your spirit at all.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you kind of have the externals without the internal. You have kind of the form without the power to bring about that change.
Who you are.
Right. Now, I know the first time you came to his way, mm-hmm. you were here about a month or so and mm-hmm. left, and then came back. I guess I'm interested in, having left, you'd been other places, you had left there before. Mm-hmm. Why did you want to come back here? What was it why didn't you say, that one doesn't work either, none of these work, why do I need to move on? Why did you come back to his way? What did you find the second go around maybe that you missed the first?
Well, I knew that there was something different here, and the big thing that was going on with me was I was just divorced in May, and then I came here in June. And I was kicked out of another rehab that shortly before I came here. And it was dealing with the finality of the divorce. And once I was able to go through that and kind of process it, that it was done. We were done at that point. That's when I knew that I was then ready to come back in here. But what stood out to me was the spiritual aspect of this program more than the others, and I knew that that's what I needed. I needed to rehabilitate my soul.
Okay, and you talked about that you became baptized and
right.
and continued to work on that spiritual growth over the years. Now, I know you and your current wife have been married a couple years now.
Yes.
Okay, and I know that journey, like you mentioned earlier, has been rocky at points, but then has gotten better, mm-hmm. And seems to be improving pretty consistently. I guess I wanted you to maybe share a little bit about what some of the blessings that have come through your recovery have been. I mean, obviously, going through addiction and all that's a painful process, and going mm-hmm. this journey for you has been 20 years, something like that. Yeah. So that's a big chunk of life there.
Right.
A divorce, and I know you had kids and mm-hmm. and that type of thing. I guess now it's kind of coming full circle, the spiritual life becoming kind of finally the piece that finally is put into place and is having meaning. What are some of the blessings that are coming now out of this newfound spiritual growth and recovery?
Well, one of the biggest blessings is, I can tell the guys that I got a car, and I have a good job, and I'm stable. We got a house, and I'm able to feed, and pay bills and do all that. But I didn't have a relationship with my children. When I got divorced, I was in rehab. You don't have any rights when you get divorced when you're in rehab. I signed the paper, and she said if I if you don't pay any child support, and I wasn't in a position to pay child support at the time, so I signed the paper, and in which case I would have to petition the court to have those rights, and I've just done that this year, which is in the process right now. The lawyers petitioned the courts. We've went through the paperwork, the money, and all that, and I now have with my two daughters, I've had contact with both my daughters.
Okay.
My oldest daughter wanted to only speak in text, which was fine with me because she told me for the first time that she loved me, and probably since she's been 10, which I cried like. Yeah, been doing a lot of that, leaking, if you will, as the Grinch would say. And then my middle daughter, she's talked to me on the phone, and plan on meeting her in July. So those are just a couple of the blessings. I'm blessed with a job. I'm blessed to have a wife that's loving. I have a better relationship with my parents now. There's just been a lot of mending.
Right. I mean, that's the thing that I think you're focusing on that's so critical. I mean, you can go through and get the slogans and get the ideas of recovery, the theories and all that kind of stuff, but genuine reconciliation that begins obviously with you and your relationship with God also then begins to expand to a better relationship with your parents, a marriage relationship that's completely healed and whole and different, and then beginning to reconcile with your children and all that. I mean, the beauty of, to me, this recovery journey for you is how God's bringing wholeness to what was a lot of fracturedness and a lot of brokenness. And a lot of it's come about not because necessarily you chased it or pursued it. You just let God work in your life, and then over time your kids start coming back. He brings somebody in your life that becomes the right person to have a lifetime of marriage with. Those kind of things kind of begin almost as gifts and presents from God instead of something you went out and earned or deserved or created yourself.
To me, it's amazing that he can take a bad situation and make good. Only God can do that.
Right.
I would like to say I wish I never would have drank alcohol, but I wouldn't meet my wife. I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met different people in my life that I've met that have been instrumental in me getting sober.
Right.
I wouldn't be here in Alabama.
Right.
It is a journey, and it does come full circle, but it's the hardest thing that you can tell somebody is it's not in your time. It's always in God's time.
Right.
Whenever that time is, he'll provide that as long as you're obedient.
Right.
That's the key is having faith and having obedience.
Right.
And being that son, I've never. I heard in a class something that you said, and I take things and I remember them, that the one thing that Jesus yearned for was to hear his Father say how proud he was, and he got that when he was baptized. For this is my son whom I well please.
Right.
And my dad told me that the other day, and it's good.
That's awesome. And that's what recovery is about. It's about that healing, about that wholeness, and it happens deep within us.
Yeah.
And that's a great story. And I know you got some exciting things you're looking forward to with getting your relationship with your kids back, and maybe seeing them this summer, and be able to have that kind of time together, and to continue to work in the directions that God's given you opportunity to do. I'm proud of you, and thank you for coming in and sharing your story with us today. And thank you for listening and watching. If you'd like to know more about His Way, you can check out our website at hiswayinc.org.